Well, Evergreen College is an amazing example of what can go wrong if you let these crazy children sort of dictate the way human beings are allowed to behave and the way discourse takes place on campus. To the Cliff Notes, what I was going to say, they wanted to have a day of absence. They traditionally had a day of absence where people of color would take the day off to school where people would miss them. Sort of like, didn't they engineer that in L.A., A Day Without Mexicans? It was a movie, right? It would shut down. I'll just tell you right now, LA shuts down without Mexicans. But instead of doing that, the social justice warrior mentality that thinks that every white man is some sort of an oppressor and you need to figure out a way to eradicate them from the world, they decided to go the opposite route and force white staff and white students to stay home. Your brother rightly protested, saying that is inherently racist. Like what you're proposing is racist.
He's an anti-racist.
Yes, he's anti-racist.
And the problem is that the diversity movement, which has now become the equity movement, is actually racist.
It's racist against white people.
I don't even want to say it's reverse racism or racism against white. It's openly racist.
There's
it's
no
openly
such thing
sexist.
as reverse
Exactly.
racism. There is either racism or no
Thank
racism. You. That whole proposal that racism against white people is reverse racism.
No, look, this is a cult. This is a cult. And the way you know that it's a cult is you ask for the definition of racism. And if somebody tells you it's power plus prejudice, and therefore certain groups can't be racist because they have no power, that's how you know somebody's in the cult. Because if you look it up in the dictionary, it doesn't say anything like that. Another one would be gender has nothing to do with sex. Go to the Oxford English Dictionary, look at the difference between 3A versus 3B. Gender and sex have been closely tied. And sometime in I think the 1940s, a couple of fields in the U.S. started using gender to be behavior, sex to be, that which is your dedicated genotype, phenotype. What is going on is that these people are changing the definition of words in order to push a cult into the exact place where it must not go. It must not go in the diversity office. It must not go in HR. You cannot have this openly racist, openly sexist cult in the place which is the immune system.
Yeah.
And so that's the key thing is that we're used to thinking of our immune system as being there to protect us. But if you think about an autoimmune disease, it's when your immune system starts attacking the self that you're in real trouble. So learn the signs and learn the tells. You don't have to sign up for Jordan Peterson's postmodernism. Just ask somebody whether black people can be racist against whites. And as soon as you hear power plus prejudice, you know you're talking to a cult member. As soon as you hear that gender and sex have nothing to do with each other,
right,
and you have recourse to dictionaries, and you start talking about the history, and somebody starts to say, well, that's your white fragility, that's your white privilege, why are you in denial, why aren't you accepting allyship? Okay, so suddenly it's like, okay, it's Xenu and the volcanoes and the clams again.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And one great piece of evidence about that was this whole Google memo thing. The Google memo thing, the difference between what that guy actually wrote on the memo and what was published in so many different publications, so many different online websites, is just straight up libelous. Like that guy, I know he's going to sue Google, but he could probably sue a host of people once he's done with that. Because they changed what he wrote and turned him into this horrible, evil, sexist person to the point where the CEO of YouTube was saying that she read it and it made her sad, that the whole thing made her sad. Well, he wrote a piece based on why people of different genders are more inclined to gravitate towards specific things.
But he made an error.
What was the error?
The error that he made was that he used a reserved term, neuroticism, from the Big Five personality inventory, where it is a reserved term denoting a particular psychometric. And so rather than saying men are less conscientious than women. He said
women are more neurotic.
He said women are more neurotic.
I actually brought that up with him, and he regretted it. He regretted bringing that, because I told him, I said, that's my only criticism. It's like, that's a derogatory term.
But again, I had not quite remembered that the Big Five personality inventory, is what openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But, when you see something that careful, most people just didn't read it. They went with the headline.
Right.
So that's the first thing. You should guess. somebody that smart is probably using a term. If I say moral hazard to you and you don't know economics, you're going to think, oh, wow, what is a moral hazard? Is that like reefer? Has nothing to do with that. It's a reserved term, right? So if I keep talking about rent seeking or moral hazard, I'm not talking about landlords, or somebody offering your kid a doobie after school.
Right.
So that was like the first intellectual failure. I just have been dealing with this where I talk about power laws and statistics, which is a particular type of probability distribution. And somebody says, geez, the powerful people in our country are so protected and privileged. Why do we need laws to protect them? Like, what? Oh, you said power law. It's like, that has nothing to do with